Hello, my name is Dominic James, and I shall be taking you through a video on driving the former Phoenix Street Circuit, which used to be home for the United States Grand Prix from 1989 until 1991. Right now, we are driving on what used to be the start-finish straight. To the left would have been the pit lane. As we're passing 3rd Street, the pit lane would have merged with the normal track as we kept going down the start-finish straight. We are now continuing on down the main straight. The characteristic of the main straight and the circuit in general is how bumpy it was. It was resurfaced multiple times between Grand Prix due to the extreme heat that caused the surface to break up. However, since the Grand Prix has gone away, the streets have not been resurfaced too much and so are very bumpy still. Once again, we are continuing down the relatively long start-finish straight for the circuit. A fun fact about this circuit is that each of the 3 races were won by McLaren Team Honda. That is a very rare feat that McLaren shares with a few other select constructors, such as Red Bull Racing. And we're continuing on down the circuit. At the time, there were not those railroad tracks. There's been an addition since the end of the race. On your screen right now, you are looking at a map of the 1989 and 1990 circuit layout. The areas marked in red are areas that are unable to be driven in the current day. It is important to note that Phoenix Street Circuit is exactly that, a street circuit, and the fact that any portion of the track can be driven on at all is an oddity in the Formula One world. However, this just shows that a huge portion of the track is still accessible despite all the additions in stadiums and apartments and other buildings that have cropped up since the early 90s in Phoenix. And we are back on the circuit on what would have been originally turn 1 on the circuit. Unfortunately, as you can see to the parking lot to the right, corners 1, 2, 3, and 4 are completely inaccessible because they do not exist anymore. But this would have been the area where turns 1, 2, 3, and 4 would have happened, with 3 of them being 90-degree corners. But here we are back on the circuit again to where turn 4 would have taken us on the circuit, and we are now on what is considered a straight, but is a corner, but can be taken flat out. This long section right here, getting up into the gears, into 3rd, 4th, and what would have been 5th gear back then. We keep going, it curves just a little bit, and then another flat section, straight section, and we keep taking it, and taking it. By now the cars would have been in 6th gear, and then we take a sudden and abrupt, acute left-hander. Back in the day on this circuit, these railroads didn't exist, and this corner wasn't curved like this. There's a lot more smoother of a left-hander, but it takes us on this side of the buildings, and up to turn 6, or would have been turn 6 on the circuit. And so we are taking off once again. This would have been another long and fast section of the track as we are coming up to turn 6 on Monroe Street. By now the cars have been 4th gear, 5th gear, and then it's slam hard on the brakes as hard as you can for this tight left-hander 90-degree. Of course, nowadays there's a stop sign and ASU right next to it. But then you go on this extremely bumpy and rough bit of circuit that is Monroe Street. You take it all the way to another hard, bumpy left-hander 90-degree. This one would have been turn 7. And again, you're coming in at really high speeds, which was very abrasive on the tires, which was a characteristic of this circuit, of high speed but high abrasion and really rough on the suspension. And here we go again, preparing to go through what was turn 7 on the circuit, waiting for an opening, still waiting, typical Phoenix traffic, especially around this busy business center. And off we go, finally through turn 7. down another long straight that is split up with a stoplight. This is another section very common of street circuits, is to have long fast straights that are punctuated with right hand corners. Makes for a very difficult race for both driver and car. Difficult for the driver at the time because they have to shift all the way up and then down through the gearbox, and then the car because they have to come to sudden halts, which damages the brakes, the tires, and the suspension because of how bumpy the circuit is. But eventually they get to turn 8. A fun fact while we wait at the corner of turn 8 is that Eddie Cheever in 1989 became one of only 8 Formula One drivers ever to take a podium at their home Grand Prix. Now, statistically, a home Grand Prix is listed as a Grand Prix within a country that the driver shares a nationality with. However, Eddie Cheever was born and raised in Phoenix, Arizona, making him part of that exclusive group of 8 drivers to ever do so. As we keep waiting for the light here at corner number 8. Green light. Almost off to get going down the back straight of the Phoenix Street Circuit. Again, another super fast, super long, flat out section of the circuit. Also very bumpy like the rest of the circuit. So go all the way. Little stop right here. Well, we keep going down the back straight. Drivers would have reached around 190 miles an hour here and would have been high up into 6th gear by this point. As we unfortunately had to deal with a fire truck blocking the road. The Formula One drivers never had to deal with that in their time. One thing to note about Phoenix Circuit is that it was a very open circuit for a street circuit. Historically, street circuits are usually very tight, very narrow, very twisty, but the length of the road you see here, the width of it as well, was the width and length they used back in the day in the 80s and 90s, which is a pretty wide circuit, A, for period, and for the cars at the time. But now we're about to approach corner 9, which again is another hard 90-degree corner. Shift all the way down from 6th down to 2nd or 1st gear. And then we're blasting up towards turn 10, which is another 90-degree corner. After this section is a very nice section, although it is quite tight. We take turn 10, which again is a 90-degree left-hander this time. And we take off. Unfortunately, there is a stop sign in the middle of what would have been the straight between corners 10 and 11. Even though this was a fairly small straight by Formula One standards, it was still pretty quick. Our drivers gain up into 4th and 5th gear. As we approach turn 11, which is another 90-degree corner, this one another left-hander. This one the barriers were brought way in, so that way drivers really had to slam on the brakes again to the corner. And now we are approaching turn 12, which would have been near the entrance of the pit lane. However, due to the construction of the police building, the pit lane is inaccessible. And also due to its construction, turns 13, 14, 15, and 16 are not able to be driven to this day. But regardless, there you go. You have finished the 15 corners of the Phoenix Street Circuit. Something really cool is you get to say that every day you drive on a Formula One street circuit. But regardless, thanks for watching the video. My name was Dominic James. I hope you enjoyed. Take care now.